Welcome to the new sound of online radio. Welcome to the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network. 'Cause you make me feel like I've been locked out of heaven. A mix of today's hits and hard-to-find favorites, combined with the most entertaining and intriguing talk anywhere. This is your sound. This is the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network at UBNradio.com.
Welcome. We are Del and Debbie's Mind, Body, Soul, the home of invigorating talk on all things to do with health and well-being.
That's correct.
And I'm one of your co-hosts, Del A.D. Jones, and I'm a certified transformational coach and a 3 principles practitioner. I help my clients achieve a more peaceful, loving, and joy-filled life, regardless of their external circumstances. And before I introduce you to my fabulous co-host here, I'm just going to mention that we are a call-in show. And if you have a question or comment for our guest, just call in at 323-284-7826. Or you can also post a question or a comment on our Facebook page. That's where we will be live streaming right now as well. So hope to hear from you. And now, next to my beautiful co-host, Debbie.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I am the other half of Del and Debbie, Mind, Body, Soul. I am Debbie Carlin Boyle, and I'm certified as a personal trainer, an integrative nutrition and health coach, a fitness instructor. And what I do with my clients is I help them find balance in everything that feeds us, in addition to the food on our plate. And we have a wonderful show, and I have the honor of introducing our guest today. So today, we're going to laugh. Okay, so I want you to join us because we're going to laugh with our special guest, comedian of over 20 years, Dani Modisett. Dani discovered at an early age that laughter could be used when discussing a difficult subject matter. Using humor throughout her life in many areas of her life has led Dani to a career where humor is used in relationships, in the workplace, and with the care of Alzheimer's patients. Dani is the author of 2 best-selling books, a teacher of stand-up comedy at UCLA, and a facilitator of workshops using the tools of comedy to improve productivity in the workplace. Her Laughter on Call movement pairs comedians with Alzheimer's patients to use laughter to give grief and overall improve to give relief, not grief, and overall improve their quality of life. So there's so much to talk about today with this amazing woman. So will you please welcome to our show, Dani Modisett.
Wow. Thank you, Dani.
Thank you. Impressive to me, Dani. Wow.
Full-time mother, a professional comedian. You've got so much on your plate, so thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy I started a movement. I
you
love hearing
did.
that. That's fantastic.
It's a movement.
Yay.
And we want to hear the sort of the original source of it.
Yeah, you said it was. You grew up with laughter, knowing that laughter was prevalent to talking about serious situations. So give us a bit of background on how you grew up, where you grew up.
So let's see. I guess we moved from New York City to Connecticut in the mid-70s, and it was not a joyful time for my family. And I think I discovered very early on that if I could make people laugh, it would release some of the tension. So I think that's initially where it started.
So you were the clown in the family.
I was, and I had little clay puppets that I used to play with at the table when nobody was talking because they were so mad at each other. And,
Did you mimic with the argument that was going on to
yes,
try to
I
make light of it?
Yes,
to try to
punch. Daddy doesn't really hate mommy.
What a great way to diffuse something, though.
That's like Punch and Judy.
Yes, although it wasn't that long ago, but yes, it feels like it was that long ago. But yeah, so I think that was my instinct. That was my instinct.
Yeah.
And then where it became formal. I was an actress for a long time, and I got restless, and I went and I took a class at UCLA, the class that I then went on to teach. And it was in stand-up comedy with this woman, Shelley Bonus, who was one of Richard Pryor's wives. And
how many wives did he have? Just side note here.
I don't want to misquote her, but
she had more than a few.
Yes, and she was a really special person, really eccentric. She's actually a physicist today. She's a really unusual person. And so you have a class of like between 20 and 35 it's in the extension program. And she said, after like the second class, she said, you know what, it pulled me aside. She said, a lot of people come here, but you're actually a comic. So if you want to do this, you should do it. And that was kind of all the encouragement I needed. So I was probably on the road like 6 months later. And at the time I thought, oh, she's just blowing smoke at my dress. Like, no. But then when I went back to teach 15 years later, that same class, I was like, oh, I get it. There are people who
came
just
full circle.
Well, and there are people who walk in and you go, oh, you're a comic. Now, you may not do it because it's a really hard life.
No, absolutely.
Yes. But there are people who just process life that way. And so that was wonderful. Yes, it's just how
and you're
we
one
respond.
Of those people.
Yes.
Now, during your acting career, did you do mostly dramatic or was it comedy too?
Oh, no, I did my share of sitcoms. I did a little show called The Finelli Brothers where I played Chris Maloney's girlfriend, I believe. Somebody's girlfriend in a very tight pink dress. Like it was like a pink condom. It was the tightest thing.
Was this in the 80s? When was this?
I believe that it was in the 80s. Yes,
I kind of remember that.
So yeah, I did a couple of comedies, and then I did my Law and Orders. I did. I played a girl on a cruise who they think it's like an anti-Semitic. I get shot, and they think it's like this anti-Semitic thing, and really it wasn't. The guy just wanted tickets. It was like a way to get free tickets or something.
To kill somebody. Okay,
yeah,
good one.
Wound me. I don't know. And then I also I played a lot of serious stuff too. I was in The Doors. I was in the original Wall Street. I am that old. I got my SAG card in the original Wall Street. And then I did a play, actually, that toured the country, a couple of Broadway shows, but one I understudied Jennifer Grey. And that was a play called Twilight of the Golds, and it involved a gay fetus. It was a little kind of science fiction where they had Jonathan Tolan's wonderful writer had formulated this play where they were able to tell that the fetus was gay and what was the mother going to do, and it had actually
sounds like a Woody Allen film. I'm thinking about those. What was the one with the giant sperms?
Everything you always want to know about sex or something.
Yeah. It wasn't actually that funny, although we each had monologues to the audience, and I think that's how I got the job, is that you had to do this monologue to the audience, and they knew because I had done all the stand-up that I could do it. So. And then, so what happened was, you know the little puppets I talked about? So I wrote a show about marrying my husband, a solo show, because somebody called me, an executive, I'm not going to remember his name, and it's not Alzheimer's, I swear, called me and said, hey, I've seen your stand-up. I want you to come to New York and do your own evening. And I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to do that. He said, well, yeah, you are, and, I think you do. I was like, well, I don't have anything. He said, well, I'm not asking for Seussical. I just want you to come to New York and do 45 minutes. So I did. I wrote it, and I realized that, like, the apartment that I had been living in, my father died 21 years ago, and when I went to New York to clear out the apartment that I had been living in when he died, I couldn't get out the door. Like, I just couldn't get out the door. I got the Law and Order job, and I kept stalling the mover. And I realized in that moment, I was like, oh, this is a play, actually. Now, I may or not write it, but I understand that this is a play. I was a theater major. I know this is a woman who has to get to the next part of her life and whatnot. So when I got that phone call, I was like, oh, yeah, I actually do have a play. So I wrote that. And I went to New York, and in the play, it was a solo show where the audience, it was called The Move, and the audience was basically there to help me move. That was how I broke.
It was interactive.
Yeah, well,
so it was
because I set up, like, you don't really have to do anything.
Okay.
I don't need you to do it. I just need you to be here because otherwise I'll never get out, kind of thing. So it was a way to break the fourth wall, essentially.
Yes.
And as I'm packing up, I find the little puppets. And then I tell them a story or two, and then I hear, and big voices, and the puppets have now grown up. And they're big and they're mean. And they're basically your mean, this is a mind, body, soul.
Your shadow side.
Yes. This is like the voice that tells you it's never going to work.
Yeah.
And they were super, super mean, and it was very funny. And
little devil on your shoulder.
Yeah. So that was the beginning of me, like, using comedy in more long form. Getting it out of stand-up and saying, okay, how can I tell a story? So that was actually going along very well. I was out pitching it as a television show, and then I got pregnant. Now, in the interim, I got married, which is nice.
And there was a husband along the way there somewhere.
Yes, I did, and we were like trying to get pregnant maybe for like a week or two because I was saying right. No, I was like, I have to get pregnant. I'm in my late 30s. I was like 38. I was like, we have to try. I mean, I don't know if we'll even get pregnant.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure that I wanted to have a baby. I just wasn't sure that I wanted to die without having one. Like
You wanted one more than you didn't, really.
Yeah, I was like, well, who knows? We should at least try.
You never know until
don't.
the actual baby comes along. You don't even know when you're pregnant.
No, I
You know?
definitely
I know.
didn't.
Yeah.
I kept saying to my mother, what if I don't like it when it's
I
born? Because
know.
some children I love and other ones I don't like. And she's
Yeah.
like, oh, trust me, that takes care of itself.
It
Well,
really
never
does.
dislike your
It
own
can't
child.
God
be
willing.
described.
But I
until-
definitely did not read any pregnancy books, and I was like, no, I'm not falling in love with something that could die. I'm no dummy. I know, it's really dark.
Yeah.
But anyway, of course I saw him, fell in love with him. But, okay, so that was the thing. So then I had this baby, and I really didn't know anyone who had a baby yet. Like, my friends were comedians. So I thought, oh, God. And I was trying to breastfeed, and, you know, the most natural, unnatural thing a woman can do. Like, I think I spent I put in an 8-hour day massaging my left breast just to try to.
It can be very difficult.
It was
But good for
crazy.
you for sticking it out.
I did. I stuck
you know?
it out. Yeah. And anyway, but the rest of it, I really didn't. I was like, this is crazy town.
Yeah.
Like, why doesn't anybody tell you what this is like?
Yeah, I know.
So I said, well, if they told you, you probably wouldn't do it. But I said, I'm going to put my comedy friends together, and we're going to do a show about this, and everyone's going to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And so I did, and that was called Afterbirth: Stories You Won't Read in a Parenting Magazine.
I came to that show. You did one here at
yeah.
close to the studio.
Yeah,
didn't
I
you?
did it for 10 years.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
In fact, I think we came
God,
to
how
two
did
of
I
them.
miss that?
In fact, in this building, I just walked by Stephen Cragg's director's chair, and
Yeah.
he was like a star of Afterbirth. So that's just funny that he's in this building.
Funny.
So I did that, and then what happened, and then that was published as a book for St. Martin's Press. And that was the same principles that we set up earlier of using humor to be able, as a way in, to tell the truth.
Yeah.
Right.
And my only kind of rule for people who wrote was, I don't ever want to feel that the child is in jeopardy, because then it's not funny. If
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
genuinely worried about the kid, then I stop listening because I'm worried about the child.
Right.
So they all were from so much love. And I edited all of them. We toured the country. We did San Francisco, New York, Boston, and LA.
I bet you were really well received.
Oh, yeah,
too,
it was-
'cause
Yeah,
people
it was-
can
it was
relate
great.
so well to
Yeah.
to everybody's
I also
stories. They're
remember
so universal.
My therapist years ago saying, about how you handle children as well. Like, you can say anything to your children if you've got a sense of humor behind
really?
it. Oh, yeah. And it's so true. And I remember, because there's something like when we have to have a serious talk,
Right.
that the defenses go up. But if you're
Right.
laughing as you're saying something, they're engaged.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And it's so true.
Yeah, when they're running in front of a car, I
No, exactly.
somehow
There's no time for
can't
humor.
find the funny.
Yeah.
Or when
no.
they're gonna,
I mean, there are some
Yeah.
things that are very impulsive and very in the moment that you have to stop the action right away. And that would
Exactly.
be one of them, you know.
Exactly,
But
or when they want to kill each other. they do
But
them.
you know when you want to sit down and have a talk, if
Yeah.
you diffuse it with laughter, and really, when I was researching the show after we had our pre-conversation, it makes so much sense, and I kind of feel like the world would be such a better place if the whole world applied the principles of diffusing a parking place argument or whatever with a little bit of humor.
Yeah.
You could
Right.
just really come from such a better place and have a better outcome instead of
Right.
all the angry stuff that escalates now to where guns come out.
Right. Well,
You know?
it does require a certain amount of perspective
Yes.
and pulling the camera back.
Yes.
You know,
totally.
and
Stop and take notice of what's going on and then
Right.
seeing, and like you said, there are some people that naturally come in with the comedy in place.
right.
And there are
right,
other
with that
people that
instinct.
come with the dark side in place, so they
Yeah.
don't instinctively
there's-
go
Right.
to the
Comedians
comedy.
have a very big dark side.
Yes,
I just think
totally.
it's a reflex to process that
yes,
way.
Yeah.
yes,
And it also, one of the biggest issues I think even publicly now is, it really requires honesty.
yes,
And that's
with
what
everything we do.
that's what makes people laugh.
Yeah.
That's why that show was so successful, was because you were like, oh my God, somebody's finally saying
So
that.
give us
Yeah,
an
I
example
can
of,
relate.
because I want to go on to the couples one in a minute, but Afterbirth, what was your funny story you shared?
Oh my goodness. So my my funny tragic story was that I was invited to my, I think, either 20th or 25th high school reunion 20th or 25th high school reunion, and I was nursing like a 6-month-old. And I knew that they were all going to be there with like teenagers or college kids.
Funny.
And, once again, I was so behind the curve socially. And then I kind of flashed to, I projected forward all the ways that my age was going to be inappropriate for this kid. So like graduation, I would like not be able to, high school graduation, like I would like not be able to read the program and I'd be chomping on my calcium supplements and, and then and when he's married, I'll be like wheeling myself down the aisle, hopefully, and, not able to hear the vows. What? So it was all a projection forward of how off the timing was of my life. And that played very well, especially in the major cities, because women were getting pregnant later.
Yeah.
You don't ever stop to calculate, oh, wow, what is this really going to look like?
So how did that transition into the to your next book, Take My Spouse?
Oh, okay. So that's really easy answer because your children grow up and they start to read. And so you can't tell stories about them anymore.
No, exactly.
They get really mad.
Of course.
And now in
like
days of social media, boy, we be really careful.
And I publish a lot, so it would be total invasion of privacy.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then I was like,
whereas husbands are a whole other kettle of fish.
Husbands and wives are
no privacy.
No. And that was one of the snafus of that show, of producing, and it was called at the time, Not What I Signed Up For. That was the original title.
Oh, wow.
And what happened was, so I thought, well, I want to tell grown-up stories. Now, it also happened to coincide with my own 10-year anniversary in my marriage, and we're not good at anniversaries, my husband and I, and 10 was very bad. Very bad. We were like in a...
Why?
How so?
How was it bad?
Well, we're not good at anniversaries, I think, because it's just too much expectation. Like, it's like it should look like
I don't
the
even know what the
Bachelor
10-year
finale.
is. Like whether it's rust or...
It should be rust. That's exactly what it should be.
What is 10?
But I decided to make the most of it. And so we went they had like a 2-for-1 sale at, I always say it's a hotel that rhymes with Core Reasons. Off the 101.
Yes.
And it was like, it's like this corporate Core Reasons. And so we were in the basement of this. Of course, we got the basement room because we were with the coupon people. So of course, they stuck us in the basement. And so then we ended up in one of our big fights. I cannot tell you what the fight was about because I never remember what our fights are about. It's like childbirth. I just don't remember it. But we were having one of our big fights, and it was very like Robert Altman, like I was like in a t-shirt and nothing else, and and he was like mumbling with a scotch, and then it just escalated. And then I realized that thing that you always can rely on as a couple, which is like we're both mammals, so we both have to eat, so we could take a break, and that's a good thing to remember. Like you can always take a break and eat, and come back, and the fight.
I thought you were going to say when you said mammals, I'm thinking, you're going to have sex.
Yeah, that too. But that in itself is humorous. That you're having a fight and you stop and think, oh wait, we have to eat. I mean, that's funny. That diffuses the situation.
Right, we need reserves
right there. Right, yeah.
We need some energy.
I was just going to say, I mean,
to maintain this rage. So we go to what was at lunchtime was like a sushi bar is now like an Italian villa, and the same girl that was in a kimono is now like a wench, and we're
in the hotel.
Yeah, of course, because that's like we're like pushing aside like sides of beef to get to our table, and then here's the thing about that coupon. In order to get the coupon part, you had to say we're here with double the fun. Every time you ordered anything, like a drink or a massage or whatever. And you can imagine. So now we've just come out of this rage fest and we're like, we're here with double the fun.
That can't be anything but break the ice and make it funny.
Because you can't double zero. So we were like, okay. So anyway, then I decided, that works so well with Afterbirth. I'm going to get people to tell funny stories about like that worst moment, right? The moment, not what I signed up for. So that's why I called it Not What I Signed Up For. I want that moment where you thought, oh, no. This is not for me. But you stayed. Because I'm very actually, despite my kind of dark sense of humor, I'm actually very committed to family and doing whatever we can to try to stay a unit and love and all that. And so that's how that started. So I gathered people together, many of the same people from Afterbirth. These are all professional comic writers. And we did a show called Not What I Signed Up For. And it was so cathartic and sold out.
Now,
and
did you have to be married to your present spouse that you were telling the story about, or could it be like one from the past?
It could be one from the past, but they were not divorce stories.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it could definitely be one from the past
Yeah.
because it's that moment, you know. Although I did prefer when you got to the other side and it had like an inspirational element to
Yeah.
it, like you persevered.
Exactly.
But Stephen Cragg, God bless him, he told some crazy stories, and there's no way they were all true, Stephen. But he's a genius, so he can.
Oh,
do
there's
whatever
no
he wants.
way that he's still married after telling the stories.
Right? No. But he's a genius. So he was so funny. I gave him a lot of rope. And so, but the interesting thing about that show is, of course, I did have some people, because I edited every story, I met with everybody individually, and there were a few people who the night before the show canceled.
Oh, wow.
And said, my spouse just read it and I can't go on stage with it.
Oh, my gosh.
No.
Yeah.
You think they'd ask a little sooner?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you
The
don't.
night
I mean,
before.
because in order for it to be a compelling story, as
Yeah.
storytellers, we know it has to have high stakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it just became too revealing. And so I met with my editor, my St. Martin's press editor at the time, and I was like, well, you know, I think I want to be an editor. I think I should be an editor. I should come work for St. Martin's. And she was like, no. You have another book in you. You should write a book.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, well, I do have this idea. I had written this article for Huffington Post about, you know, in the vein of everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
And it was everything I need to know to stay married. I learned being a comic. And it basically became the spine of this.
Oh,
like,
fab.
this is the book.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is what this book is. It's kind of not hard. It's not easy to see.
Yeah,
in this
we got
moment,
it- we
but
got it
it's
up
called-
there.
We have it up on the
Okay,
screen.
we have it in
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
many places, everybody.
Wait, tell them the name of the
it's
book.
Take
Just-
My Spouse, Please.
Yes.
And wait, the tag is How to Keep Your Marriage Happy, Healthy, and Thriving by Following the Rules of Comedy.
I just
Very.
love that. I love that principle.
It's
I
really,
think and I wish I would have known.
well, it's not too late.
Well, I'm not married anymore, but yeah. So for the
But
next,
for any relationship,
yeah,
and that's
yeah,
the thing. Some
yeah.
of my biggest supporters and
course.
fans are single women, and it's a great wedding shower gift. And because I interviewed like over 100 couples,
idea.
and so there's a lot of wisdom in the book.
Yes.
And it was funny because I did this very big tour, this 16-city tour that was sponsored by the Jewish National Book Council, I think they're called. And so I went across America, and people would walk up and they'd be like, "Oh, make it out to my husband, like show him the door," kind of thing. And I was like, "No, it's not like that. It's
Yeah.
actually about staying."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
because it all has these specific tools. Because I went to that syllabus from the UCLA class, and that was how the whole thing happened. I was like, "Oh, when you're a comic, people always say to you, especially women, but everyone, oh, that's the hardest thing in the world to do. That stand-up comedy is the hardest thing in the world to do. I could never do that." And after one of those particularly bad fights, when I was like in the fetal position thinking, I think maybe there's something harder than stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
I think maybe marriage is a little harder
Yeah.
because, you know,
tough.
stand-up is like over in an hour.
Yeah.
And, you know, you go sleep
Yeah.
with a waiter and you feel better. And
Same thing in a marriage.
right. I never found that to be true in my marriage.
Yeah.
So I was like, wait a minute. This other hardest thing to do. Wait, I actually taught that hardest thing to do. Maybe there's something in that hardest thing to do that would be applicable to this hardest thing to do, which I'm finding to be the hardest thing to do. And I literally went to my syllabus from UCLA and I looked at it's a 12-week course, and like all the chapters seem to really, you know, show up, listen, let go of a bad night, pay attention to timing.
Yeah.
I mean, even like pay attention to your wardrobe, which, you know, when I was writing the book, I thought, oh, well, this will be the throwaway chapter. This will be just a little light, fun thing.
Yeah.
No.
Turns out not at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
Like couples have a really strong opinion about
course.
grooming and how you present yourself. And
Yep.
it ends up reflecting not just the physical, but the effort that went into
No,
it.
exactly.
And
You know, that's so
Yeah.
true. I have so many divorced friends, and a lot of my guy friends who are divorced will say things like, she just stopped caring. She just stopped grooming. She just, in all areas, she just let her body go. She just, stopped dressing for me. And, I think that's a really important element, is to just, go back to the roots of what attracted you to each other in the first place, and try not to lose sight of that throughout your relationship, no matter how, hopefully for the longevity, for the endurance. That was something that was very important to me. That was like one of top of my list in my marriage, is to stay my husband's girlfriend. Because
now I have to write that one down. Myself.
Yeah, really. I didn't originate that, but when I heard that line, I thought that's important. You need to be your husband's girlfriend once you're married, because,
right. Well, he needs to be
or
your
he's going to be looking exactly. But I mean, for me to work, yes, it's two-sided. But for me, for the things I knew I had to work on, that was one of the top 5, I should say.
Right.
Because otherwise, what were men doing, especially in this city? What were men doing? And my husband's a director, so looking for a girlfriend, even though he's married, or vice versa. To me, I wanted to do the best I could with what I could, and that included how I took care of myself.
Right. And the interesting thing about that, and it was actually my husband who made this point about like how you mature as a woman. Like maybe when you were 25, like a push-up bra and a short skirt was really hot, but then you're 45 and maybe tone it down a little.
It's got to be appropriate.
Yeah, maybe a little
age appropriate.
Class.
It just can't be ignored, is what it is. You can't ignore you, like, go get dressed up for an event, but for your husband, you come home and you look like, every single night. I can't.
Well, I think that goes across the board on all levels. I mean, you're keeping a sense of humor, keeping the conversation, exciting. I mean, it can go across the board, not just the way you look.
But I'm saying it's one of the top ones that was important.
That you think, oh, well, I have to keep the element of surprise in my marriage, and I have to.
I think some people don't keep growing. I would say that's more the other way, that people sometimes get complacent and don't bring anything new to the conversation or the relationship. I think if you're always on certainly not self-improvement, but just interested in doing different things.
Well, you have to stay curious, and there is a lot of evidence about doing new things together.
Right. So you don't get and not being bored
together, right? So you're not on automatic pilot, not just going to the same place every night doing the same thing, because eventually someone will get restless.
Yes, exactly.
Very true.
Surprised
There's so many
me,
elements.
Right. It just surprised me that something that I interviewed couples for a couple hours, and I always threw in like, and so what about like how he dresses or she dresses, and then, oh my God, I didn't mean to upset people. Like,
so it always became sort of a red flag.
Yeah.
Wow,
yeah.
Interesting.
It was
not
like,
surprised.
Well, as a former costume designer and stylist, I do have an opinion on what my boyfriend wears.
Yeah.
Very strong opinion.
Yeah. I mean, so I just think that part surprised me. But anyway, so when my editor said, "Oh, well, you have a book," I was like, "All right." So then that article, the Everything I Needed to Know I Learned Being a Comic, then was sold as a book. So that's what started the whole like 3-year. Basically, it was a 3-year journey of researching, talking to religious leaders and therapists and couples and famous Jerry Stiller and Ann Muir, like how people who had really been around and people who were comedians, but not all comedians, but a lot of the people are comedians.
Yeah. And using laughter.
And the only criticism I got for the book was, all the couples you talk to are really happy. Why aren't there more couples like me? From like unhappy people. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was supposed to be an inspirational book. Like the whole idea
that's so funny.
is to make you feel like it's
you're talking to people that are making it work.
Yes.
And what is making it work? Not people that we kind of know what isn't making it work.
Sometimes letting things go, seeing, as you said, the humor in something really quite
painful.
That's
a chapter, letting go of a bad night. I mean, and when you're a comic, if the joke bombs, you can't sit in that moment and like say, I'm a terrible person, comic, I should die. Like you have to let go and get on to the next joke.
That's great. I've seen that. That's really
great. And it applies to a relationship too.
Yeah, it applies to everything. And then I was asked to teach a workshop to business people next. And like, and here's how that happened. So when my mother has advanced Alzheimer's, which is kind of the end of the story now.
Yes.
But she had round-the-clock care in New York City, and she had a geriatric care manager, and we hired an agency. And so there were 5 women working in rotation.
In her home?
In her home
okay.
in Manhattan.
Okay.
It was crazy expensive. I don't recommend this for anyone.
Yes.
I'm sure it was. I was just going to say.
The guy I found, so she has long-term health care insurance. Now, if you're in your 20s and 30s, you don't need to fall asleep here. It's not going to be that long. But she had long-term health care insurance, and so they were billing the long-term health care insurance, and then they were also billing me the same exact amount. So they were basically doubling. Right? So I started to calculate, and it was like a $12,000 mistake.
Oh, wow.
And I was just livid. So I called the owner of the agency, and I talked to the accountant, and he was like, oh, because they never stopped me. At any point, they could have said, what are you doing? Don't write us this check. We're getting the money over here. And they didn't.
Yeah.
So I called the owner and I said, your accountant never stopped me. Like, he just let this go on. Well, he's under a lot of pressure. I'm so sorry. We're going to cut you a check today to make up for it. Great. Then I get another email from the accountant. It's the wrong figure. He got the figure wrong.
Yeah.
So now my head, I'm like going to explode. And I call the owner and I'm like, listen, there is something wrong with your accountant. Like, he just misquoted me this figure. What is the problem? He's awful. And he said, well, I know, Dani, but I can't kill him. So what should we do? How are we going to solve the problem? And I was like, oh, I see what you just did there, sir. Like, you just broke the tension by making an unexpected comment. Also true, we can't kill him.
Yeah.
And also moving towards a solution. And I was like, oh, yeah, right. This is not just for marriage.
No, absolutely.
This actually is for everything.
I mean, my mind's going like 100 miles an hour thinking this would be great to teach in kindergarten, but so that they can develop how to resolve issues with your classmates with humor. Or, probably be a lot of bottom humor in kindergarten.
Well, but it's about communication ultimately.
Yeah, exactly.
When you break down, that's what I learned writing the book, is that it's the laughter is the byproduct.
Yeah.
It's all the components. It's listening and responding and the letting go and paying attention to timing, not bringing up, if your husband loves football, like, don't bring up taxes during the Super Bowl. Like, give the guy a break, you know? And same for me when I'm watching whatever, Dancing with the Stars. No, I don't like that show. But
it was something you like.
The Bachelor you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, The Bachelor. That's
Last
what I'm
night.
watching. Anyway, where was I? So I realized I realized how irrelevant it was to business as well. And then coincidentally, somebody said, I have this group and I'm bringing them to LA. Can we set up a workshop? They're all CEOs and they want to learn how to use humor. And so we did that. And in 2 days, I taught a comedy workshop for all day, both days, with this guy who works on voice, Roger Love. He's a really talented voice person.
I'm curious how that broke down. How did you, and like what, so you have a room full of executives and business people. How did you break down that workshop? I'm just curious, that the little bullet points.
Well, at the risk of giving away the secret sauce.
I know, you don't have to. I'm just, I
there's
want
a very
to see how that worked.
Specific, first of all, successful people are very challenging to teach because they
That's
know a
one
lot.
of the reasons why I'm asking you how it broke
they
down.
know a lot.
Yeah.
So you have to set up exercises that encourage vulnerability in some way. So there's 3 groups of them that I do. It's 5 things you hate, and it can't be traffic. Like, it has to be very specific.
Yeah.
And then 5 things that scare you, and 5 things nobody knows about you.
And what about the 5 most embarrassing things you've ever done in your life that breaks embarrassment? I was at a business meeting the other day and we were all waiting for it to start, and they did that. They actually said, okay, let's go around the table and each one has to share one of their most embarrassing moments.
You know, it's so funny you should say that, because I've been going to all these networking meetings out here, and that they did the same thing. Here's my problem with that. If it's really embarrassing, they're not going to tell it.
Yeah.
It's not going to be honest. Especially people who have an investment in maintaining their power, their power. And it's so on the nose, I'm not sure you're going to find comedy in that unless they have a humorous way of telling a story.
That's true.
And it might just humiliate. I don't even know. What is the purpose? Like, I was thinking the same thing in that meeting. Like, what is the purpose of this?
Yeah, especially 5. I mean, that's...
Oh, no, sorry, this was just one
yeah,
thing.
Just
one.
But
okay.
the funny thing, the best thing was the meeting started before it got to me. But I am like...
Oh, you got lucky.
Oh, and then that's the other thing. Then you have like half the room has revealed like
they're vulnerable.
And then the other half hasn't. So I always love 5 things that make me angry that are because it tells you so much about a person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And like
what their triggers are.
one of
also
the
helps
women
them to zero in on what
Yeah,
makes
and
them
it-
angry.
and-
We don't often think about that. We just get angry.
Right, but
You know?
what is it really? What are the nitty gritty? Like, I hate the sound of the TV when I'm in. Or there was like one woman who was terrified of squirrels. And it was, it was just like super funny. Because then you take one of those items and you write about it. And you get all the details and you set up the who, what, and where and like why, what about it, the why of it. And then that's where you find the comedy because it's such minutia and it's so specific and it's so unique to you that it ends up being funny to people.
Yeah.
Because I don't care about squirrels.
Yeah.
I don't ever think about squirrels.
Oh, that's so funny. My brother, no, I'm not going to tell this story. My brother hates squirrels.
See?
But some people do. I mean, they're a rat.
because
They're in
they-
the rat family.
Well,
you know,
because
and
they
people
killed
think-
all the red squirrels in England, the grey squirrels that came over. And they rip all the bark off trees. So he's got this massive, great big forest next to his
so he
house
has-
that all these trees are dying because of squirrels.
Right.
that's
So
the
if he
reason
had a
hates them.
dream where he was being eaten by a squirrel,
Yeah,
like, you know,
it
you
could
could
be
find
really
funny stuff in
tragic.
that.
Yeah.
So, and also, you know, it's also tragedy plus time. He might not be able to tell you the squirrel story now.
Yeah.
But when he's living in a condo in 20 years
Yeah,
and
he
he
wishes
reflects
he had-
back,
Yeah.
he'll be like, that was insane that I cared about squirrels that much
Yes.
or not.
Exactly.
So that's what got me into like the Klein comedy coaching. And then recently I've been coaching a couple of congressional candidates because, you know, there's so many women.
Good.
Yeah.
Which, you know, we have this big influx of people who are running for office who have like no public speaking experience.
Yeah.
And so it's great to be able to, because
Infuse
if you
humor.
can find a way to be fully present in the room, make some little joke about something,
Yes.
you will get the audience
And
right with
absolutely.
you. Right
I mean,
at the
I'm
top.
just
If you're
reminded of
authentic
Obama.
about
I
it.
thought his timing and delivery was brilliant.
Well, he was a wonderful speaker.
Who
He
was this?
Obama.
yeah.
Oh, Obama.
I
was
think
yeah.
it is-
Yeah.
Still. Yeah. Still.
Yeah,
He's
but
still
he
speaking
because
today.
he had that sort of I don't know. I missed that. I missed that delivery.
Well,
Of course we do.
Again, it's about honesty
Yeah.
and being truthful in the moment.
and being vulnerable. I think self-deprecating humor is always goes over well. I think.
Yes, I think you have to be careful with self-deprecating humor as someone who traveled in it for a while. I think as a woman you have to be careful because you don't like a little bit goes a long way.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't want to undermine your authority or your expertise by, you know, selling yourself short all the time.
No,
Like,
exactly.
You know,
Like
Plus,
Roger-
I would think that would
Roger
weigh on
Dangerfield.
you too. You know.
Yeah,
that
well, it's not funny if it's
yes,
rapid fire,
yeah,
the same
over and over on
tone.
yourself.
You know, I'm thinking of like sort of Roger Dangerfield and things
Oh,
like
Rodney.
that.
Rodney.
Dangerfield,
Oh,
right.
Rodney,
Yeah.
sorry. What did
Yeah,
did I
it was
call him?
he really like there were some very classic comics
Yeah.
that went after their wives. You
Oh,
know,
yeah,
went
yeah.
after other like my ex-husband directed comedy. That was his thing.
Oh, wow.
Lot of comedy. A lot of
Oh,
comedy
interesting.
commercials, and he did sketch comedy shows. He was one of the directors of Mad TV and did a lot of Comedy Central shows.
Oh, cool.
And so he was a very funny guy, which is what attracted me to him in the first place in college. I mean, he made jokes
Wow.
about, 19 when I met him. And he made jokes about everything, and it made me laugh. And that was like not a criteria for me that I had understood as a criteria, but it really became one.
For most
because it was
women.
important.
Most
Yeah.
women love laughter.
No,
But what
Absolutely.
happened was throughout the years, I became the butt of his jokes.
Oh.
And
no.
in our social circles, and I wasn't the only one who noticed it. So I had to, maybe 10, 15 years into our marriage, I mean, we were already in it for a while, I actually had to sit him down and say, you know, it's very funny what you're doing, but I don't like being the punchline.
No.
So and then I would have to, like, we had a safe word I would have to say because I knew he was building towards it.
Just in case you
my
weren't close
goodness.
enough to kick him in the
So
shin
because he
under
needed the
table.
laughter, he was so used to it, and I was there all the time. And when we were in our social circles, who else? What else? I'm a good source of comedy for him, but it wasn't good for me.
No, so
you know?
so that I discussed that in the book actually.
You do.
Affiliative humor versus aggressive humor
Yes.
and sarcasm and making fun of instead of making fun with.
Yes.
That's a
Exactly.
very important distinction
Yeah,
in a couple.
totally.
Like
Yes,
that is
yes.
really, if you want to ruin a marriage, just do
Yeah.
that.
Well,
Like,
it
yeah,
was sort
exactly.
of the beginning of the end,
yeah,
because it didn't stop.
It's unkind.
Yeah.
You know?
So we
Yes.
are getting tight on time, and
Okay.
I want us to get us to what you do today.
Yes, exactly.
And with,
Okay.
With how did you get to working with Alzheimer's patients? I know you have a personal story there.
Yes, I do. So my mother 5 years ago was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and she lived, as I mentioned, she lived in New York in an apartment. She had round-the-clock care for a couple of years, and it was $17,000 a month.
Wow.
and to maintain. And towards the end, she wasn't even leaving the house. So like, what was the point of being in New York City? It just didn't make sense anymore. And so I figured all the moving parts out, literally, flew to New York, got an aide with me, and we flew out here, and I found a place for her to live, which I love, which is called Silverado. They don't pay me to say that, but I love their whole vibe. They're all about the crazy flag flying. There's a lot of facilities that you go to. There's a lot of whispering when you get to the Alzheimer's wing, and that's the memory care unit.
Yes.
And I didn't want that for my mother because
of course
I think
not.
there's so much shame with the disease for the people having it and experiencing it that you don't need to pile on by giving them like, the penitentiary dining room. Like it was not cool. And Silverado, that's not their game.
Yeah.
That's
Good.
all they do.
Love it.
And they have dogs running around and kids running around, and it's a lot of energy and life. And the one on Fairfax has lots of sun. And so that was the one that I found for her. And she was a very social woman. So I also knew that she would like that energy back.
Yeah.
So for the first couple months, she was surprisingly well adjusted. Everyone was shocked because she's a very opinionated New Yorker. And she seemed okay. And then about 4 months in, she became withdrawn and she wasn't eating and she was really kind of staring at the wall and seemed really depressed. And I was, of course, heartbroken and guilt-ridden, as all children of these situations are. And I was at my dentist, who I love, who always, she's a woman. She always talks about heavy stuff. I think she makes me cry because then I don't have to pay attention to the pain she's causing me. So it's
she
like,
makes you cry instead of laugh. Okay.
That's like some emotional
that works
pain.
too.
I always love it when they ask you questions and you've got your mouth full of tools.
Yeah.
It's like, how can I answer?
Yeah.
Most of the time they can understand you.
She's fantastic. And then, I said, I'm so sad that my mother's not happy and I just wish I could hire a comic for her.
Yeah.
And she was like, well, why don't you? And so I was like, oh, I mean, I don't know. Should I just put that? It'll look like I'm too cheap to hire an agency or something. She was like, stop it. Like, just do it and see what happens. So I, like an hour later, put on Facebook looking for a comedian who would like to work with in geriatrics, part-time job. Let me know. And my phone rang, and it was my friend from New York, Amy Stiller, Jerry and Ann's daughter, Amy. And she was like, oh, I just hung up the phone with a friend of mine, and she just called. She lives in LA. She's a comic, and she wants to work with seniors. You should call her right now.
Wow.
God.
Synchronicity.
Yeah, the universe coming together at the right
completely.
time for you. That's
Completely.
amazing.
So this woman showed up. She met my mother. She was completely honest and so disarming and really saw my mother and talked to her. And there's an article about the whole thing.
Yes, I've read that article. It's
in
amazing.
AARP.
I recommend it on AARP.
Yeah,
yes.
in the June issue of AARP, I really go into the details of that. And they just bonded, and within a week, my mother was eating again and much more engaged with the community
Remarkable.
and reaching out to people. And so people saw the difference in my mother.
Onto something.
And I had already said to Sue, I was like, this is something here. There's something here. And then someone approached her at Silverado and said, yeah, I see what's going on and I want this. So she stepped outside and called me, and she was like, well, I think, you're in. We're in. Let's do this. So that was our second client. And that woman is completely nonverbal, but can laugh riotously.
I think that's the mistake some people think. They just think just because they lose their sort of short-term memory and sometimes can look like they're not responsive, but they haven't lost their ability to have emotions.
Yes.
I mean, my mother had Alzheimer's too, and she loved a good laugh.
Right.
Yeah.
But it takes a tremendous amount of patience, and it takes
absolutely.
the unique perseverance that comedians have.
Yes.
And that's why it's such an unbelievable marriage of artist with circumstance.
Yeah.
Because these comedians, we're all used to talk. You get the vibe that you're bombing. You keep going.
Yes,
You keep
you
going.
just keep
And
going
the longevity of the career itself, you keep going. So these are people who inherently know you keep going. You try something else.
That's a good
How to
combo
push
for them
beyond
to
that
be,
Yes.
initial, boundary,
I mean,
barrier.
this could be their toughest audience for
It
sure,
is.
you
It
know,
is.
but they persevere.
Well, they do. And the
how
interesting
healing.
thing is, so I wrote the article for AARP, and that came out in June. And now I'm just kind of caught in this whirlwind of managing it around the country and figuring out how to grow the business. And I had a meeting with 15 comics, local comics. And what's interesting, what's so fascinating to me is there is this alternate universe of comedians who love old people.
Yeah.
It's not everyone.
Yes.
But the ones who show up for something like this, they all have a story.
Wow.
They loved a grandparent. They loved, they worked in a senior facility. And so it's a really unique group of people.
Yeah.
They're getting paid because that's part of my mission is that everybody gets paid.
Mm-hmm.
But they're also there because they feel passionately about it.
Absolutely.
is
And
important.
then the other thing I'll just mention that came out of this is I've been touring facilities, and one of the executive directors at Belmont Village, Patricia Murphy, she said, well, I like this, Dani. This is brilliant, but I actually want you to come and teach everybody here. I don't want to
That's
just
a great
hire a
idea.
comic. I
Yeah.
want you
Yeah.
to come in and teach. And so then I created 4 different curriculum for the staff, for leadership, for families,
Yeah.
and then for comedians.
Oh, that's
so
That's
amazing.
brilliant.
So that
And
I
your
love
mission
that.
is, I mean, you want to take this worldwide.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do. I
Because
feel
it's
really
needed everywhere.
Yes. I
And,
feel passionately
and
about it.
how's it going here, just within the LA area? Is
It's really
it just
cool.
the word getting out? And
Yeah, it's word getting out. And I just got my first 90-year-old woman, and we're going to send Alan Murray over to see her. And he's a pretty renowned comic, but he also plays piano. And so he'll go there for an hour. He worked in senior facilities before. So I'm slowly building up the clientele here and the different facilities. I worked at both the Belmonts and a Sunrise. So I hope to do a lot more teaching because I think that's the way, because I there aren't comics everywhere,
Well-
but I can certainly create a curriculum
Yeah.
where it can be used.
Absolutely.
And full-time care around these people
Yeah.
to have people just infuse a little bit of humor
Yes.
with everything,
Yes.
whether it be
Yes.
giving medication or changing their clothes, whatever.
Yes.
Using
And-
humor can only help.
Yeah, I mean,
The
one
quality.
of the things I learned in my research is because there have been studies about the
just-
effectiveness of this. And
Yes.
most recently, I will say, if you want to learn more about
Exactly.
it, the Science of Laughter Time Magazine special edition basically proves everything I've been doing for 20
Yes.
years.
Right.
And that is
Totally.
brilliant. But what I learned in the studies is that it also is tremendously effective for the caregivers and for the families to get some relief because
Yeah.
the stress level, I mean, those people are such heroes
I can
and
imagine. I
you know
agree.
what they
100%.
do, and so to be able to come in, and I have an acronym that I come in and teach them about breathing, and but it's called Blaze, like Blaze, because I think I'm being funny, and sometimes it works. The younger staff members, you get them to listen if you
Yes,
say that.
that's of
Yeah.
course.
And the S is silly,
Yeah.
don't be afraid to be silly, and
Yeah.
so I'm totally committed to this. So.
Yeah.
That
That's
it's amazing. Yeah,
Oh,
that
cool.
you have taken such talent and such commitment and now spreading it and realized what works and now spreading it globally.
I'm just thinking of other institutions where this could all, I'm
well,
thinking
everything.
of prisons.
Prisons and
I got approached by the
everything
Veterans
anywhere serious.
Association, so
Yeah.
I'm going to try to work something up for them. But
Yeah.
no, there's no limit. There's no
Absolutely.
limit.
no limit.
So-
Absolutely, yeah.
fabulous.
Humor,
It's
it's
great.
just humor is universal as a healer. Period.
Yeah,
You
and there
know?
are ways to teach little simple tools and also by example. It
Yeah.
comes from the leadership. If you allow for imperfection in the culture of your community,
Yeah.
which you have to where there's illness,
Yes. Of
course.
you will find humor. They will find humor if they're given permission.
Yeah.
So
I love that.
Oh,
Well, we're
that's so
just
good.
about out of time. We want to hear anything that you may have coming up, and we want to hear how people could get a hold of you
Yeah.
and your books.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So this is the book, Laughter on Call. This is about couples. So I would definitely get this. And as we said, it applies to
All
just about all your
Yes.
relationships.
Yeah. What a
and
great-
also a good
great
primer
gift. Love
for
it.
the Alzheimer's work. And my website is laughteroncall.com. And my other website is kleincomedy.com, and that's for any business coaching that you need. And in terms of what's coming up, I am kind of nose to the grindstone. I think that's the expression
Yeah.
of setting up, incorporating, and making sure that comics are in the major cities. That's my initial goal: is Washington, Atlanta, Florida. Texas, I've had a lot of response, and San Francisco.
Wonderful.
So
and now, if
For
somebody
laughter on
had-
call.
for laughter on
Yeah,
call,
yeah.
exactly.
So if somebody was either a comedian or somebody was a family member of somebody that they feel could benefit from that, they
Yes.
would just contact you on your website?
Yes, or a facility looking for training.
Yeah.
And then ultimately what I'm moving toward is training videos. So
I was just going to
I'm
say,
writing
that's how you
those.
could go global.
Yes,
is
exactly.
being able to
So-
do like an online course
Exactly.
and videos.
We're gonna get to the online
curriculum.
course.
Wow, love it.
Fabulous.
We're
any
headed
any
that
other
way.
books coming up, or have you got any in mind?
Oh,
Actually, Alzheimer's
I think
patients
the
ones would be-
Alzheimer's one possibly, but I really want to focus on getting the videos out because that seems to be the way
It's going to
people
be time consuming.
take
Yeah.
in information. And I think
Exactly.
it makes it much more personal. And the
it's the
fact
way we
that
take in.
I'm of the world.
Yeah.
I'm not just commenting on it.
Sure.
So thank
Yes.
you for
So
having
one,
me.
Oh.
we've got 1 minute.
Yeah,
so
1
any
minute.
final words of wisdom you'd like to share with our listeners?
Just stay present and have courage to show up. That's the thing. That's the biggest obstacle, I think, in the Alzheimer's community right now is that people are so afraid of mental illness that they don't even show up.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, like, show up, call me, call one of my comedians, and we'll give you some tools how to be present.
That's wonderful. I found with my mother when we stopped trying to sort of compare to how she was and we just enjoyed her in the moment, it was so much better for everybody, and it was really quite laughable, some of the situations she would discuss or talk about. So
it's
there is humor
proven.
in everything.
It's proven.
Exactly.
Thank you for doing what you're doing,
Yes.
and we're so excited that you're going to keep on doing it. So please get a hold of Dani after hearing the show. If you can get a hold of her through us or any of the ways she said today. Thank you for being with us today. Thank
you
you
for
for
having
being
me.
with us. We're going to see you all
Thank you,
next
Dani.
week.
We'll see
Down
you all
Debbie's Mind,
next
Body,
week.
Soul. Bye, everybody.
Bye.